Tonight, we turn our focus to the national mobilization and opening of offices by the National Unity Platform, which now police says it has suspended. Police wrote to the National Unity Platform separately and yesterday issued a statement. I will take time to read through the whole statement as it is, because I think it's one of those very interesting statements, and you have seen the comments that have come around that statement that the police spokesperson, Fred Enanga, read out to the public yesterday. Also, police wrote separately to the Forum for Democratic Change, which has been bickering between, you'd call them two factions, one led by the party president and Secretary General, Nandala Mafabi, who's Secretary General, and Patrick Oboy Amuriat, who's the president, and the other, the guns have been pointing to the Katonga Road office of the People's Government, which is led by Dr. Kiza Besigye. And there's been almost an equal split within the Forum for Democratic Change. It is supposed to be conducting elections to replace leaders who have overstayed their leadership by now close to 3 years because of COVID-19, when the party was not able to transition leadership. So it's delayed, and the party says if it reaches October without electing new office bearers, the party will be facing a constitutional crisis within the Forum for Democratic Change. The lead up to the banning of National Unity Platform's mobilization efforts across the country were sparked mainly by what leader of National Unity Platform, Robert Senta Muchagulanyi, said in Luero. And police in his letter says he's talking sectarianism, tribal sentiment, and others. We need to interrogate that a little bit more closely. One of my guests in studio, I listened to Yusa on the Big Talk with Kanari Mugume the other day, discussing the same subject. So let me introduce who I have in studio here. Starting from the extreme end, from Busiro, Member of Parliament, from the National Unity Platform, the Honorable Medad Segona Lubega Akalia Magwa. Very nice to have you, sir.
Pleasure, and good evening to you, to the panelists and to the viewers out there.
From Mulanda, from the Uganda Media Center, Executive Director and Frontliner, Ofono Opondo. I want to go to pronounce the other one because the other day you were discussing with...
I educated him.
You educated?
How to pronounce his name now.
Oh, okay. Mr. Ofono Opondo, very nice to have you.
Thank you, Chas. Thank you, and good evening to our viewers. Nice to be back here.
From Kanyandahi village.
But you guys have missed something.
Hold a moment.
You have missed something.
Let me do the introduction and then we'll find what I've missed.
He said he's happy to be back.
To be back, yes.
That's Obote.
Yes.
That's how Obote used to say it. So he has joined the UPC, this man.
From Kanyandahi village, Muchiko, in Roteta sub-county, Brasha County. This is my...
grandfather?
Eh?
Grandfather?
No, I am, yeah, he's my former voter. He is my constituent. Chief Executive Officer at the Independent newspaper, magazine, or Independent Media House. Old man of the clan, Andrew Mojuni Mwenda. Very nice to have you.
Thank you so much for hosting an old man.
And from Kira Municipality, from the Forum for Democratic Change, and the Frontliner, Ibrahim Semujunganda. Very nice to have you, sir.
Thank you, Charles.
Missing on the front line tonight, and again, another week missing from the front line, is the Honorable Winnie Kiza, all the way from the Mountains of the Moon in Kasese, and from the Alliance for National Transformation, and the Frontliner. She's unwell, but she'll be joining us possibly next week, and we wish you very quick recovery. We know that you're watching the show, so you can text us and participate in the discussion. I need to remind our viewers that this show is running parallel on the Afro mobile app, so you can actually get there early, keep watching so that when we switch later in the show, you're not scrambling to get onto the Afro mobile app to pick the latest on from the NBS Frontline. Gentlemen, it's an all-male show. I want to start with you, Honorable Medad Segona Lubega. I believe you received the communication from the Uganda police stopping your activities before the police came out to the public to share a statement. Are any major differences between what was communicated privately to the party and what was communicated to the nation?
Well, first of all, of course, as a disclaimer, I officially am not speaking for the party, and therefore I haven't received the official copy of the police letter. I have read one in the social media that has been circulated. I have also seen one Mr. Fred Enanga reading some document of sorts on television. So, and I believe because he has owned up, the contents are consistent with those that one circulating in social media. Yes.
Okay. So the contents are the same. You have, your party has responded. It says it's going to defy this position. Is that correct?
Well, I have also seen the party's position. I think the word is not defiance, but we made it clear that we shall continue abiding by the law. However,
and by abiding by the law, what do you mean? What is the interpretation of abiding by the law from you?
The text of the law is clear. It is in the laws of the Republic of Uganda. We will continue complying with the law, notifying the police as and when we have a program, just the same way we did it. I think let me not start on a negative note. I want to start on a positive note by thanking those gallant officers who this time round did not interfere with our program, with our meetings. And I am sure that we have been vindicated. And this because we've always said there is no chaos until police starts chaos. We moved together with them. You would see them in the midst of our crowds, and we were working together with them without any problem.
Including the one in Mbale on whom you were pinning, one of your supporters was forcibly pinning posters on his back and on his bike.
I mean, that is humor. And to me, it was okay. In that one, if a citizen comes and pins a poster on a police officer and there is no negative reaction, there is no chaos, to me, that's maturity. People exercise humor differently, and I salute such a person.
You're saluting the one who was pinning it on, or the police officers?
Both. I mean, what is wrong with being humorous, and what is wrong with receiving humor with courtesy, with a courteous reception? I have no problem with any of them. I actually salute both of them. They decorated the day. And my view is we should continue like that. What I meant by following the law is the law requires us, as organizers of public meetings, to notify the police. We shall continue notifying them. Now, this thing they call suspension, first and foremost, they do not have that power. It has been clarified for those who were dyslexic before, I mean, who were not able to read and understand the Constitution of the Republic, because we kept telling them the Constitution does not require us to notify, to seek permission from you. We had the Police Act, which was making such horrendous requirements. It was struck down by the Constitutional Court. Then there was a reenactment of the Public Order Management Act. Again, that provision was struck down, and the court clarified over and over again that police does not have the power. So if you don't have the power to authorize or prohibit, you cannot have the power to suspend. I think what the police would be doing, is to invite a meeting, to caucus, and say, look, this is where we think you have crossed the red line. How do we address this? Secondly, if they feel, like my president said, if they feel someone has broken the law, I am not averse to anybody being arraigned and prosecuted. But of course, with the caution that we have all the information, and where we are headed, now that we have been provoked, is to lay on table evidence of what we are talking about, the tribalization of management of affairs.
We'll come to that in a moment. Let me read the police statement for the benefit of our viewers. This is the press release. Police suspends NUP mobilization activities till further notice. This is issued from the Public Relations Office. It's number 132 or 01. Yes. And it says, as you're all aware, the police, under its mandate to regulate public meetings under Section 32(1) of the Police Act, granted permission to the National Unity Platform to conduct nationwide mobilization activities and official opening of party offices. Additional guidelines on the proper conduct of the activities were also given, which included proof of permission from owners of venues, gatherings in town halls or appropriately enclosed areas, prohibition of processions, demonstrations, and regulated rallies, acts of incitement to violence, or other public order management violations. While we completely support the right of individuals, groups, and other citizens to peacefully gather or assemble and make their views on matters of public policy, we have noticed that in all areas where NUP mobilization activities have been carried out, there have been total breaches to the guidelines, thus causing public disorder, unnecessary traffic jams, loss of business, malicious damage to property. For instance, in Imbarara City, their rowdy supporters vandalized a Toyota Hiace under registration number UBD 251J, and traffic accidents, including a fatal one in Hoima City on the 11th of September 2023, where one Mogisa Norman died and 10 others got serious injuries during the NUP convoy. Furthermore, in Kasana Luwero district, the mobilization activity was used to incite violence, promote sectarianism, make illegitimate calls for the removal of an elected government, and issuance of defamatory statements against the person of His Excellency the President of the Republic of Uganda. The press statement goes on to say, in view of the blatant breaches of the guidelines, the activities of the NUP are immediately suspended. This announcement is a follow-up to our communication of the 12th of September 2023 to the National Unity Platform leadership, halting the planned mobilization activities and opening of offices until such a time that they are ready to comply with the guidelines and rules of law. We are sending this strong message that our country, Uganda, will not wait for its villages, towns, urban centers, and cities to burn before taking action to protect the citizens and property. We are going to put an end to the mob mentality, bullying, and intimidating tactics of NUP radicals against innocent civilians and law enforcers. We have very robust plans to uphold rule of law in liaison with other stakeholders, and will respond appropriately against all perpetrators of incitement to violence that can lead to civil unrest throughout the country. Uganda is one of the safest countries in the region and across the globe, and we plan for it to remain that way. This directive stands until such a time when the NUP is compliant and law-abiding. Signed by Katsigazi Tumusime, Major General for Inspector General of Police on 13th September 2023. Mr. Fono Pondo, this communication from the police sounds quite activist, in suspension.
Well, first of all, when NUP began the mobilization, they wrote to the police. And the police wrote back to them, and they agreed on a number of guidelines, which the police now says NUP is violating. Among those guidelines was notification to the Inspector General of Police and down the chain of command to territorial commanders, DPCs, and so on. Also, that they would agree not to have large processions, especially those that disrupt other normal activities like traffic and so on. So, in that context, one would expect that NUP organizers should abide by the undertaking they made to the police, save for isolated cases where things are spontaneous, like all political activities. You go to open an office and then supporters or just enthusiastic people who want to see what's happening, the crowd. That is understandable. But what appears to be is a deliberate effort by NUP members at various forms of provocation, including messaging. If you were the police officer, you read possible scenarios when those breaches are repeated over and over. You don't want that to become the culture, that people agree on one thing and do another. And so in that respect, therefore, I think the police is right to the extent that it should intervene. Now, what form of intervention should the police make? In that, I slightly disagree with the police because I actually talked to them, to the police, after the incident in Luwero. I spoke to them and I said, from the political side where I sit, I think that the process of NOP had, generally speaking, gone well. And I also added the political angle. I said, in my view, they were not going to achieve the intended purpose of the mobilization, save for having a roadshow opening offices, because NUP generally, and Kyagulanyi in particular, you can say, has been dead for the last 2 years after election. You could see that the media has not been paying much attention to Kyagulanyi because he has been absent anyway. And so any attempt to be lured into provocation by NUP, by Kyagulanyi, would have the unintended consequence of giving him publicity, probably giving him a cry of victimhood that he's being frustrated. And I told them, I said, in my view, I think they should call NUP people and say, look, we have observed you the last 2 weeks. Can you change the following areas? Now, if they're adamant, then you can bring the law. You can bring the law. But 2, let NUP people expose themselves by bad behavior. That bad behavior could be being rowdy or insulting other people, abusing them, making unsubstantiated statements. Those ones we could deal with politically. You let them expose that they have no policy message, for example. So you can catch them there. But also you let Ugandans to see NUP for what it is. If it is a sectarian outfit, Ugandans will see them.
So you want the politics to sort out the sectarianism? I
had preferred that the politics,
not the police.
The politics should sort that out. I think it was Tricky Dick, Richard Dixon, who once said that leave nonsense to fresh air. Fresh air has the ability to cleanse nonsense. So if NUP is saying nonsense, if NUP is promoting sectarianism, if NUP is insulting people with unsubstantiated claims, let us leave the politics to sort them out. But what now the police has done, of course, the law enforcers, what they have done is to give these guys some lease of life. Because for me, I had wanted that Kyagulanyi repeats what he said in Luwero.
In Kasana Luwero.
He goes to Mityana, repeats it. He goes to another place, repeats it. And then we see how he changes when he comes to Mulanda. When he has tried to present himself like a Buganda clan chief, for example. So for me, I thought that politics would sort, it would sort any other person of that tendency, rather than bring this one. Now we have entered the dispute whether the police has actually, if you don't have power to grant permission, can you have the power to withdraw the permission? But also, if they have injured the reputation of a person, could be a private citizen, you can actually take them to court.
Privately?
Privately. Including the president can take them to court. For example, and I'm not unduly bothered, if somebody says, our gallant people who fought the war came without underclothes, I would respond and say, but Kyagulanyi, 25 years ago, what did you have? So why do you think that the people who came from the bush had nothing, and after 37 years, they should not have anything? You, Kyagulanyi, what did you have 35 years ago? Because for me, I would respond that way, because I think that would. But also, I would help to educate Kyagulanyi. Say, Museveni was a defense minister, was a minister of regional cooperation, had huge land. He had bought that land of Rwakura where he is, about 50 acres. He bought it in 1969. That's what he says. When he was a student with his salary as a student, that's what he says. This is what Museveni says, that he bought that land.
You can establish the facts.
Yes, that's what he says. That's what President Museveni says, that he bought that land of Rwakura in 1969 with his money as a student teacher. He left their cows. So it can't be true that a person who was Minister of Defense, who was Minister of Regional Cooperation, and others, the GM were police officers, it can't be true that they had nothing. So I thought that politics...
they were better paid than today.
Yeah, I thought that one would have dealt with the Kyagulanyi insults rather than...
Police coming in and...
Yeah, because this one is now taking us back to 2020, 2021. My own reading is that part of the reason NUP and Kyagulanyi in particular raised to that level was the manner in which we, the government people, particularly security, handled him.
Okay. Let me just read I think the second has called it, the impugned sections, a section that the police is quoting. Section 32 of the Police Act. Power to regulate assemblies and processions. Subsection 1. Any officer in charge of police may issue orders for the purpose of A. regulating the extent to which music, drumming, or a public address system may be used on public roads or streets or at occasion of festivals or ceremonies. B. Directing the conduct of assemblies and processions on public roads or streets or at places of public resort, and the route by which and the times at which any procession may pass. Should I read on? Of interest, there is section 33 and section 34 are interesting to read. But let me come to Andrew Mwenda and ask, who is reading the law the right way or the wrong way? Because you're looking at the Police Act on one hand.
As you ask Andrew, his candidate for next election has been staging processions.
Can you allow Andrew first answer?
He started in Ikira.
Can you allow Andrew first answer the question? There seems to be diverse interpretation or different interpretation between the police and the political actors, especially from the opposition.
Well, first of all,
on the law.
I should tell you, there are two things. There are the tactical issues involved in this discussion and the strategic ones. So me, I want to focus on the strategic ones. One, since NRM came to power, it has always been afraid of allowing its opponents to freely organize. It can always pull some law, quote an incident or things like that, but to justify a common position that opponents of the NRM do not have sufficient space to organize freely. So these other justifications are brought to service a predetermined position that our enemies or our opponents shouldn't organize. They may quote a law, they may quote a constitution, they may quote a specific act of
a regulation or something?
Of a bus being burnt down, whatever. It's not that they are lying, it is simply that these are brought to service a strategic aim, which is that the opponents shouldn't be free to organize. So that is one fundamental factor. It's something within the DNA of President Yoweri Museveni and his NRM not to allow the opponents to organize freely. The second point I would like to make is, at this particular time, the NRM has atrophied. It has suffered a prolonged period of atrophy. Its legitimacy has grossly been eroded by high levels of corruption, incompetence, selfishness. I think people don't feel like the government today is there. Okay, not me say general, but many elite Ugandans in urban areas, people who are educated, feel that the government is not there to serve them. That the government is serving the interests of a small cabal of people who are in control of power. So there is widespread social and political discontent in Uganda. So when you see Bobi Wine move through towns and attract that kind of attention, is because those people are expressing this suppressed anger. In fact, I would say what you see in Uganda is the continuous piling up of social dynamite. What has been missing is the supply of effective political leadership with organizational and mobilizational skills to act as what you'd call a detonator of the social dynamite. So that is the broad strategic situation of Uganda. If I was Bobi Wine, the question therefore is, how do I play in that context? If I was to fall to opposition, I feel like they have a textbook response based on ideals they have picked from speeches and statements by Western countries. And therefore they organize without dealing with the reality of Uganda. They deal with the textbook theory. Because I personally feel like the way the NRM system is like, if you study it, it's not a traditional government of Kenya, Zambia, or Malawi, or Ghana. This is a revolutionary group that came to power after protracted struggle, whereby they started from a very small scale in the village and dismantled the state from above. They started from below and dismantled the state. You can see these systems in Vietnam, in Cuba, in China, in North Korea, in Rwanda, in Ethiopia, and Eritrea, countries like that. And you have to know that this is the marketplace, the political marketplace where I am playing. Mm-hmm. What are the core characteristics of these kinds of regimes? And therefore, how do you structure your response specific to how these regimes are organized? Because they're very durable. Historically, across historic time and geographic space, even when they have suffered prolonged economic atrophy, they have not been able to use power. So if you're going to organize against them, what are the new strategic moves you need to make to weaken them? I personally felt that Bobi Wine's speeches themselves, he was shooting himself in the foot. Two things. You must, if I was in his shoes, I would want to look at NRM as a likely strategic partner, because many people in NRM do not agree with the way the system itself has degraded in terms of its moral purpose. And even its own spokesperson here, the spokesperson of NRM and the government, you have seen he's not very supportive of what the police has done. So inside NRM, there is a large constituency that sees that A, you are mishandling the opposition, B, you are mismanaging the country. So I would consider those to be internal surrogates. All my campaign must be to appeal to them to act as internal surrogates inside NRM to dilute, weaken the kind of unite. Hold a second.
You're going on what Bobi Wine and the National Unity Platform should have done. You've read, and I just read out you listened. I just read out the police statement signed by Major General Katsigazi. As a journalist, what do you make of it? What do you think they're trying to communicate?
But that's what I started with, yes. Charles. You are trying to focus the debate on the tactical issues, and I'm saying the strategic issues. What police can look for any excuse to try to stop these people's rallies. Museveni has never allowed his opponents to organize, and he will never allow them anyway. What the police are doing is whenever opposition organize, the police have to look for an excuse to stop. But that's just an excuse. It is not, the strategic aim is not to allow opposition in Uganda to organize against Museveni and the NRM.
You're therefore suggesting that the police is working as an extension of the NRM as a political party, not as government.
Does anyone doubt that? You are suggesting that there's somebody in the audience here who thinks that the police in Uganda acts as a neutral party in this context. And the point I was trying to make is, for me, is that I feel the response of the opposition historically in Uganda has been textbookish. It needs to be to the reality of Uganda's is. I personally feel like they may not be able to capture power, but they can make a lot of progress in terms of expanding the spheres of freedom and the space within which they can operate by avoiding putting themselves in a situation where they provide the perfect alibi for police or excuse for police to interfere in them. Why march through cities and towns and create all that chaos? Why? You can organize your rallies outside of those congested areas unless they believe they don't have support for people to walk out of a town and go to a stadium somewhere and attend the
So you think they should be able to empty towns and get people somewhere?
Not only that, but they should also be able, those statements of Bobby Wine are very, as the former reporter was saying, they're very injurious to Bobby Wine's cause. Of course, I would maybe not agree with the, if I was in Museveni's shoes, I would not agree with the Ofono Pond that I let him continue with them and he will expose himself. That is expecting too much rationality out of human beings. Human beings are not that rational. So a guy can run away with such kind of statements and create for you serious political trouble.
Okay.
So a person like Museveni will not want to
We'll
take chances.
interrogate the statements in a moment. But
Museveni will not want to take chances. But people here spoke for 20 minutes. I have spoken for 5.
No, you haven't actually. I keep watching the clock.
But I am the one. You know, I'm very keen on the clock.
I know.
Are you worried about what I am saying?
I know how we deal with time on the show. But
so I just was trying to explain that I feel Bobby Wine and Besigye before him structure their debate as us against them. And in trying to structure their political position that way, they lose sight of the fact that there are so many people inside NRM who could become their surrogates, and they need to break that coalition. And there's so many other people in Uganda they need to appeal to who are either apathetic, indifferent, or disinterested in politics to be able to recruit them. So I feel like his message, when I have been following him, he's able to rally the base, but he's unable to grow it.
Okay.
Because his message tends to alienate many people inside NRM who could otherwise be mobilized. It alienates many independents who could be convinced to come into the political arena to participate.
And keeps fence sisters on the fence. Okay.
Yes, he keeps, so he tends to solidify his base without broadening his appeal. And I don't know whether...
maybe that's what the police is referring to as no prodigals. But I want to bring Semuju into the discussion before we take a break. Honorable Semuju Nganda, one is I need you to speak about, speak to the letter that was written to your party, stopping your own activities, but also broadly speak to this. Both as a journalist, a member of parliament, and a member of the opposition, this police letter stopping NOP's activities and your own activities.
The president, I agree with Mwenda, and Mwenda today really was sounding like the real Mwenda.
The one you used to know.
Can I request you not to go there? Because you were really this video.
No, I am very happy, by the way. The president is hysterical when it comes to big gatherings. You need to go back to history. I remember after the nomination of 1996, he even got a foot ruler to measure the people who were in Koro, and he said he had more people than Paulo Kawanga Semoge.
Wasn't that 2001? That debate was, I think...
No, that was Paulo Semoge, 96. Mm-hmm. I was a student then. He said I had more people, and he was very angry with Monta. In his campaign, he kept complaining against the media that they were photographing USJ with big crowds and him with smaller. In fact, it's part of the reason I know of some journalists who eventually got employed, because they advised him that for you, because of security, you stay far away from the crowds and you are unable to capture you. Mm. So this whole design...
And the journalists are not able to come to your side,
yes,
to capture the crowd and capture you in the crowd.
So this whole design of him driving into crowds during rallies was a result of that. So the crime that Bob Wine has committed, coming to the letter, is a crime of gathering crowds. Mm. When Bob Wine knows that Mr. Museveni is hysterical to crowds. So I agree entirely with Andrew that police had to find a reason. I don't think Museveni can watch TV today. last elections, including this TV, he was very angry at one time in the cabinet. Bob Wine on TV, he's go to the toilet, he's on TV, he goes to the kitchen, on TV, when he was quarreling. So, but the crowds themselves have a multiplier effect in politics. I said here, when you are discussing Bob Wine, and I think someone was dismissing these tours, that things that have not happened before are now happening. People who lost the NRM primaries or who were in the last parliament as NRM candidate, at least in Busoga, they now felt comfortable associating with an opposition. They think they can win an election. When Bob Wine was in Mayuge, he was welcomed by a former MP. We were with him in the last parliament. So yes, police and all the other institutions of the state in Uganda are run by Museveni directly. They are vulnerable. So when he tells you to stop a rally, you must find reasons. I remember the Honorable Alan Sewanya and Segirinya were released by court in Masaka over all the charges. But Museveni, after quarreling a lot, police now had to find people, some of them I'm not even sure were murdered, and said, okay, now you also have fresh charges of murder. Because the man had said, these fellows, you cannot release them. So this Kasigazi of police and his statement, and you sympathize with them. Because they are not the originator of this response. They are just...
as Mwenda referred to it.
Yes, they are just being told, this must happen, you must stop them. Then they go to read the law books, where can we hide, where can we pick something. But broadly for me, what bothers me is the civic space in Uganda. If you look, and going back, even if you don't go far away with the newspapers, with civil society, I remember, I think the last article that Mwenda wrote in Sunday Monitor was about the death of Mayombo. At that time, Museveni called Aga Khan. Aga Khan, I think, was busy. He said, you can speak to Annabelle, who was based in France. And that Annabelle was surprised that Mwenda and Kariejira were still in Monday. He said, what are these boys doing in our newspaper? Because they had written, and by the way, they are very good articles, both of them. So from then, there are things that Museveni used to allow that today he can't allow. I don't know whether it is because when you have young people who are running you, and the state has grown, the interests have grown, so the level of vulnerability surrounding Museveni and those who are around him also feel extremely vulnerable are the ones forcing them to do this. In fact, my own guess, the next elections, you may not have these rallies. Because you see, this has been a build-up. You are just reading this letter of police. There was one from Mukuraiji about the beret. Then the bombs in Kampala. Up to now, I have no doubt that these bombs in Kampala were not bombs by terrorists. They were bombs aimed at stopping political meetings, the same way they threw bombs during the campaign to remove age limit at Honorable Chaguranyi, Honorable Sewanya, and Honorable Kasibante's residence. And they said, no, this one we use for training. No investigation was done. And they not attribute them this time to terrorists.
You said last week, you said last week that the threat of terrorism cannot be underrated.
Yes.
And you said it here.
Yeah, but...
Yes. So how certain can you be?
No, I said terrorism is real.
Yes.
But I've also said that it can be used the same way Museveni was using COVID to stop the competition from organizing. So it's not that it does not exist, but it can be manipulated. And this time, you can see even the posture of the state when it is under this. I mean, I didn't see soldiers walking on the street like they did last time when there was a scare. This time, the only scare was the statement that there are bombs in Kampala, and the soldiers went to their normal...
Actually, terrorism is real. The question we must investigate is who is the terrorist.
So the letter by police, and I agree entirely with Andrew Mwenda, this old Andrew Mwenda, not the Andrew Mwenda of these days, but the one who was resurrected.
Not the spokesperson of the MK movement. The
one who was resurrected today. I am very happy with him. That this is how Museveni does politics. he can't allow you. It is the same reason that Museveni banned the political parties when he came here. It is the same reason that they enacted, was it Article 269, eventually removed by court, which was allowing political parties only to operate at their headquarters.
So statutory instrument number 1, Article 269?
Yes. The Public Order Management Act. Even the Political Parties and Organizations Act, I was in Parliament when it was being enacted. And it was trouble because at that time, the MPs, including by the way NRM MPs, because the trick was, if the opposition, the Ben Watchers are the ones who are pushing for parties to operate beyond headquarters, Museveni will refuse. There was a connivance that Medi Kagwa should be the one to present the bill. But eventually they discovered that they had removed a clause that was restricting parties at the headquarters. It was removed by Parliament. So that's how Museveni does politics, that he must not allow you to organize. Eventually, if you continue, they will come and shoot at people, they will arrest them, and then they will accuse them of sectarian. Because they think that Bobi Wine said in Uganda are the same things he said in Arua, are the same things he said when he was in Bunyoro. Because in Bunyoro he said, you guys, be very careful with the oil. These guys that Andrew Mwenda has accused of corruption will come and steal oil the same way they are stealing money in Kampala, and you may not benefit. There it was not sectarian, maybe because Bobi Wine is not a Munyoro. When he went to Usoga, he was speaking about fishing, and he said, you see, these people who are Andrew Mwenda has accused of corruption, who are stealing money in Kampala, they are the ones who are restricting your access to the lake, so you cannot continue fishing. So it was the same speech everywhere he went, addressing issues that are affecting communities where he went. So when he spoke about land in Uganda, and land, especially in the greater Rural areas of Nakaseke, areas of Nakasongola, where Museveni's clansmen and
I can see Andrew is timing me, so I'm going to cut you short
are all running farms. So I don't find a difference in Bobi Wine's message.
Let's interrogate.
The message was tailored to the communities.
Let's interrogate the accusation of sectarianism and stocking up tribal sentiment. Yeah. You're still watching the Frontline on NBS TV, and we're discussing the suspension by the police of mobilization activities by opposition political parties, particularly the National Unity Platform and the Forum for Democratic Change, which was supposed to be holding a delegates conference.
Not which was supposed. We are holding a delegates conference next week on Tuesday.
In defiance of the police?
No,
communication
you
to you?
can only accuse us of defying the law.
Are you defying the law?
No, we can't defy the law. We have notified the police as the law requires. So they are antics, antics against the law.
And you've read Section 32 of the law?
But Mwangusha, the police has not even said don't proceed. They said we shall not provide security.
And we will give ourselves
And
security.
it is okay.
In the case of the FDC.
If they have declined, it will give them security.
Okay. Crispin Kahiri is watching us and says, balancing counterterrorism efforts with the protection of freedoms and rights is a very delicate equilibrium. In my view is that respecting human rights and safeguarding freedoms are not only ethical imperatives, but also strategic assets in the very fight against terrorism. And he had said earlier that, is it possible to strike a balance between addressing legitimate security concerns and upholding democratic principles, including the right to peaceful political assembly? While terrorism is a real global concern, it should not be used as a pretext for suppressing fundamental rights and freedoms. The point that should be made is safeguarding civil liberties and human rights remains essential to democratic societies, even in the face of security challenges. Andrew, a quick one. Where do you strike the balance? Where politics is as dominant as is, and the fears that you talked about, and you have legitimate concerns about security, especially terrorism.
Well, at least what I would say is that the foundation of any democracy is a stable political order. So to be able to enjoy your liberty, you must first have order. In other words, you must have a state able to exercise a monopoly over violence. And that such a state must have more power than any other single individual or organization can command in that particular territory. By the way, for the state to perform its basic functions of ensuring law and order, it must enjoy more power than any other single person, individual, or organization. Why? Because if any other organization had greater power than the state, then they can wrestle power. They can wrestle that control from it. So, the foundation of a democratic society, a liberal democratic society, is order. If there is a conflict between order and liberty, liberty will be the one to suffer.
The equilibrium, where does it fall when you're talking about the difference between the state and the regime? Because the state can be stable and a regime unstable.
Well, sometimes what I would call, I don't know what you mean by a regime, because those are tropes used by the Western world, and they are journalists. I've never had CNN say the Biden regime. They always say the Biden administration. So why is it the Museveni regime?
Well, regime
so
and administration, regime and administration are basically the same thing.
No.
Yes, the Biden administration can collapse if Congress succeeds.
I wish you could say the Biden regime. I was asking you, Charles Mwangushi. You asked me a question, now you're answering yourself.
No, I'm just clarifying.
He is guiding you.
I'm just clarifying that.
Follow the tropes Western media use in reference to others. I have never had an American journalist and media say the Biden or the Obama or the Trump regime, but they will say the Putin regime.
And I'm saying
those words, the word called regime, are used to attach a negative connotation to our governments, to which so I'm advising you that you should not follow.
I'm arguing, Andrew.
I think that the government of Uganda is more democratic and humane than the government of the United States.
Andrew, I'm arguing and saying that for
and I don't want to go
purposes. And I'm arguing and saying that for purposes of context, regime in this case would act as a synonym of administration.
But why do you
so administration and regime is really...
Charles, you have disagreed with Andrew. Can you allow him use the phrase he wants to use?
The two people
want to debate. He wants to use the word administration.
No, they don't want to debate. They're actually debating. Go ahead, Andrew.
Charles, what I was rejecting is you using the same racist tropes Western media use in reference to other governments, and you should avoid it. You can say the difference between a state and a government, but you don't need to say regime. Having given you that advice as your grandfather, I can come to this issue. You see, Uganda is not the United States or Belgium. Here you have a process of state formation and nation building going together. The interests of the government and the interests of the state are really intermingled at a very, very high degree. That the many times the things that threaten the government also threaten the state. There are many things that can threaten the Biden regime, let me use that word, that may not threaten the institutional integrity of the state in America. But many things that can threaten the government, the Museveni administration, can also be injurious to the institutional integrity of the state of Uganda. So we live in two different contexts. And to that degree, we need to appreciate it. And what I was saying is, in a country like this, I don't know whether you're watching what is happening in West Africa. You have democratically elected governments in Mali, in Burkina Faso, in Guinea, and Niger, which have fallen out of power.
Fallen or removed.
But they have.
I thought you said elected governments, but when you say democratically elected governments,
the qualifier democratically elected.
Yes, because in those governments, actually, in practically all of them, you had an opposition candidate and party defeat an incumbent to come to power. That's why I did not mention Gabon. In Niger, Burkina Faso, Niger in French, Niger, Burkina Faso, Guinea, and Mali. The governments that were overthrown had actually come to power from the opposition. They were not incumbents clinging to power. They were opposition upstarts who had actually wrestled power from incumbents.
Isn't that the reason they were removed?
And I don't think that the military was loyal to the old administration. It is simply that those countries in the Sahel are facing security threats emanating from the overthrow of Gaddafi and the release of so many small arms that have saturated in the area. And each one of them is facing a rebel group, and that rebel group is threatening the security of the state, and the civilian administrations were incapable, or the army did not see them as effective representatives of the security of the state. So they fell. And that context should also warn us it is not true that we are over the problem. I have my issues, by the way, of the people seated here and in the whole of Uganda, including Bob Wine and Bestie combined. I think I have greater criticism of Museveni if we had fundamental issues on policy, on practically every single thing than them. Where I disagree with the mainstream opposition and the, that's why some is surprised by what I'm saying.
And I'm not
Is
surprised.
that, no, but you're saying this is the old Mwenda. This
Yes,
Mwenda of
and
2000, the criticism I make of Museveni and make
You
it
were
today.
about to deteriorate. Now you've gone back to.
Yes, the point I was going to make is that I recognize Museveni's contribution to Uganda at two levels. The stabilization of the political dispensation, because it was not obvious, neither was it inevitable that Uganda would be stabilized. Uganda could have been Somalia.
How about
Central
the
African Republic, and Sudan.
destabilization he contributed to?
Two, Museveni also put Uganda on a long-term trajectory of sustained growth, which is very rare. If you look at the last 37 years of Museveni's administration, you'll find that Uganda has been the 11th fastest growing economy in the world, in spite of having fought 22 civil wars in every region of the country, being landlocked, and being in a very bad neighborhood of a dysfunctional South Sudan, a dysfunctional DRC. One time Rwanda was in chaos, then one time Tanzania and Kenya were stagnating. So with all these disadvantages, I think he has performed very well, even though I also think that he has passed his expiry date. He has grown old and exhausted, both intellectually and physically, to provide dynamism and zest.
The many people who believed that Muammar Gaddafi had achieved exactly the same thing over 42
43
years. Now, Libya is in crisis since
Libya
Gaddafi
is
left
not
it
in
11
crisis
years
because
ago.
of
11 years ago.
Yes, Libya is not in a crisis and a failed state because of anything that Gaddafi did, but because of external intervention by the Americans, the British, and the French, who came and bombed Gaddafi and his government and destroyed the infrastructure of the state. So Libya's problem is there is a clear case of external intervention.
At what stage did they intervene?
Opportunistic. They intervened when that country was stable, and I'm sure those demonstrators were demonstrating.
Didn't
Gaddafi
that
would
country
have
fail
continued.
to manage a transition, the future? Didn't it fail to envisage a future without Gaddafi? Isn't that the bigger problem?
I don't think that was the problem. The problem was that many countries after Gaddafi, maybe his son or anybody else could have taken over and the country would have continued as a stable country.
Could have.
Yes, it's a very high
It's
possibility.
not.
But what I can say,
It's not certain.
the tragedy of Libya has very little to do with the Libyans and with Gaddafi. It has to do with the interests of the Americans, the French and the British and NATO, who came and bombed that country. And let me tell you another thing. You see, they came to Libya saying they came under the right to protect. Am I correct? That Gaddafi was, quote unquote, threatening to kill Libyans. They sponsored militias like the Misrata Brigade, like militias they want to sponsor here in Uganda. Those militias they supported are right now killing Libyans. How come they are not evoking the responsibility to protect? Why did they think that Libyans need to be protected, hold a second, from a threat of Gaddafi threatening to kill them, but they cannot protect the people of Libya from the actual mass killings by their own militias whom they put there. And then they leave and go and indict Putin for war crimes, and they don't indict Obama, Cameron, and Sarkozy for the same war crimes. So we must also understand that we live in an international environment where you have bullies who control the international system
I hear you, Andrew.
and use it to destabilize poor
without going
countries.
so much into Libya. Libya is actually going through a crisis now. There's been flooding there, and anything up to 20,000 people feared could die or could have died out of that flooding, which broke two dams just the other day. Where I disagree with you is that in that context, countries like Uganda, like Libya, would fail to know that you live in an international system that has bullies
things
and that
without historical precedent.
No.
Taiwan is regarded by those same people as a great democracy. Chiang Kai-shek ruled that place for 45 years. Gaddafi did 42.
Yes.
I have seen leaders who have been there for 50 years, Castro, and Cuba has not broken apart. The fact that,
Cuba,
you love Lee Kuan Yew from 1956 to 2013 when he died. He was prime minister for about 40 years. Then he became minister chancellor when he put his protege there. When his son came, he became minister mentor. So he remained in cabinet up to the time of his death. He was in power for about 60 years plus. Singapore is one of the most successful countries.
What he achieved was the transformation of his country.
So
have we achieved
in that period?
because
We'll go into that debate another day.
But the point I want to make is, Charles, I don't want to make the argument that the problem of Uganda is because Museveni has ruled long. Nigeria has never had a single president who has ruled for more than 80 years. It is more dysfunctional than Uganda, I can tell you.
It is Africa's
Africa's
biggest
largest
economy now, today.
But
Yes,
well,
largest economy today.
for the 250 million people it has, You understand? And all the oil it has, it can only generate only 4% of GDP as revenue. I can tell you, Nigeria is 20 times more dysfunctional than Uganda. It has never had any leader who has ruled for more than 8 years.
Yes.
Do you know any? You can begin with the Tafawa Balewa, to Ironsi, to Gowon, to Murtala Mohammed, to Obasanjo, Shehu Shagari, Buhari.
Yes, we're being unfair.
We are being
Yes.
diverted.
You see,
We are being diverted by Mwenda. So by your
it is him
submission,
diverting the debate, trying to say that the problem of Uganda is because Museveni has so long. No. Museveni can even live after 50 years and Uganda remains a stable country. Like Kaunda left after 27 years, or Nyerere after 24 years, and they left stable countries behind. It has nothing to do with the longevity of any administration.
I think you diverted the discussion. I think you diverted the discussion to...
It is you who brought these issues. Because you want to insinuate
I
that
made
there is a
reference.
problem with Museveni ruling wrong. Before Museveni came to power, Charles, Museveni came to power in 1986. We had been independent for 23 years. We had had 8 governments. Divide 23 by 8. You'll have something like 2.6.
And how many of those had Museveni brought down?
But
Gentlemen, let's proceed with this discussion.
Having short-lived governments
How
did not help Uganda in
what
any
was
way.
Museveni's
It is because
contribution
I am
in
against these
destabilizing
tactical
those
things. I want to
governments?
deal with strategic issues.
Start with Idi Amin, go to Yusuf Lule, go to Binai.
So why don't you destabilize him and remove him? You see, if you say others fail because Museveni destabilized them,
Andrew,
has Museveni been short of destabilization?
Andrew, let's
Museveni has fought 22 civil wars in every region of Uganda.
Andrew.
I am sure there have been many coup plots.
Andrew, let's go back to the debate, please.
Guns to fight
Let's go
I'm
back to...
simply saying you try, he will defeat you.
Andrew, let's go back to the
even
debate.
when I go civil.
No, Museveni has built an effective security apparatus that has protected this country from instability.
I hear you.
Including overthrowing him. And I give...
I read. I, Kasande Mirab, being the returning officer for Hoima Electoral District, having added up the number of votes cast as recorded on each declaration of results form in accordance with the Local Governments Act, Cap 243 as amended, declare that the total number of valid votes cast for each candidate are as follows. Aguda Moses, Noob, 3,972. Mugisha Uthman Barak, NRM, 18,353 votes. Mugume Ronex, Independent, 179. Muhumza Vincent Savannah, Independent, 22,071. Musings Patrick, FDC, 271. The total number of valid votes cast for the candidates are 34,795. The total number of rejected or invalid votes are 724. The total number of ballot papers counted were 35,519. The total number of spoiled ballot papers were 56. Accordingly, as returning officer for Hoima Electoral District, I declare Mugisha Uthman Barak, who has...
This is NBS Breaking News.
My electoral district. Please come forward and keep your... Congratulations. And here is the copy of your...
You have it, the declaration of results from the Hoima district by-election for the LC5 or the district leader for that district. Mugisha Uthman has been declared the winner. He's from the National Resistance Movement, NRM, and he scored 18,353 votes. He beat his closest challenger, an independent, NRM-leaning Muhumza Vincent, who polled 12,271 votes. And from the National Unity Platform, Guda Moses got 3,972. The other candidates from the Forum for Democratic Change, Musinguzi Patrick got 271 votes, and the other independent, Mugume Ronex, got 179. That declaration has just been made, and as you can see, those images are from the tallying center in Hoima district. I think he's there receiving his certificate after being declared winner of that election that happened earlier today. From what we had earlier from Shamim Nabakoza and the other team that was in Hoima district, turn-up was low. There were weather issues, but also concerns about general voter interest in by-elections. That was also highlighted by Crispy Kaheru, who's one of the most experienced election observers in this country, but now working with the Uganda Human Rights Commission, and was or is in Hoima as an observer for the Uganda Human Rights Commission, talking about what is it that is keeping voters away, especially during by-elections. What does this mean? And all this discussion is going on the NBS Afro Mobile. You can continue watching on the Afro Mobile app. You can continue watching on our other platforms, and as well as the Frontline. Let's continue with the Frontline as we move forward and discuss the suspension of activities of the National Unity Platform by the Uganda Police Force. Ofono Pond, I want to come to you quickly. Can peaceful coexistence be maintained? The balance between the concerns of security, which are legitimate, and the democratic political mobilization efforts?
Well, first of all, I want to say Kahero actually that's his home district.
Yes, it is.
Hoima, and I want to congratulate our candidate Mubarak and commiserate with the FDC, whose candidate has just got 271
yes,
out of about 40,000 votes. And by the way, from the results there, you could see probably 35%, 37% voter turnout. I think that's pretty the norm for by-elections. Even for parliament, which should actually attract a lot of attention. It is usually worse for local government by-election. So I think, but yes, first of all, Mr. Mwenda here said my statement is as if to say I want bad behavior, political bad behavior, sectarian innuendos or overt accusations to go on. No, I am saying I fully know that Chagulanyi was being sectarian, was making unsubstantiated allegations that, but I think the lawyers call it criminal libel. Because if you say that President Museveni killed Archbishop Ruwanga, killed Karisire Gwanga, killed Muzata, and others, you are trying to.
Yet he has never killed any person.
You are trying to set. No, but if he has killed Semuju and you're saying he has killed Segon when he has not, you are clearly telling a lie.
Actually, that's not
So no. I'm not saying. So I'm simply saying the government machinery, the NRM political machinery, has the ability and should have the responsibility to go and say, look, on the case of Archbishop Ruwanga, his personal doctor read out a postmortem when he died in public. And that postmortem did not say that Archbishop Ruwanga was killed by Museveni. So it should be our job to prove to the listeners, the audience of Uganda and Chagulanyi, that Chagulanyi is a liar. Now, if there is somebody who wants to take him to court, should take him to court. We don't want to give him publicity, undue publicity, undue sympathy because police is mishandling. I fully appreciate the concern of the police that there could be people there uninformed, facing different pressures, who will think that their poverty, their predicament, is because they are Banyankore people, or Bachiga people, or Jopadore people who have bought and have successful ranches. But that can be handled differently. So I disagree with the method of the police in this particular instance. Now, if they are citing that there were people who died on a road accident
In Hoima.
due to recklessness, I would want Mr. Nanga or the police to produce the charge sheet of the reckless driver. You don't wait until sectarian statement is made in Ruwero, then you cite an offense in Hoima. When people add 1 + 1, it will not equal to 2. So police will not. But also let's go back to the history of anti-sectarian law. Since 88, I think, when it was enacted.
No, it was actually during the colonial times we inherited.
No. Even the NRC
Yeah,
reenacted the statute. Yes. Where have we had successful investigation and prosecution? So these are some of the laws that actually, yes, they can be on the statute books, but I think it makes us look as if we are jokers. That audience of Chagulanyi, of Ruwero or anywhere else here in Buganda, or the people in Mayuge who are quarreling that UPDF is high-handed on the lakes. Who of them is going to side with the police that actually Chagulanyi was being sectarian? Who? However, you can go back to that same audience and explain to them that this NRM is not sectarian. If Chagulanyi is complaining about or is raising the fact that Ruwero, which was the maker of NRM revolution, hasn't benefited, it should be the NRM people to go and say that, look here, all the ministers for Ruwero Triangle, as far as I remember, save for 2, Sarando Kataike, and now Alice Kavoy. The rest of them all have been Baganda from the Ruwero Triangle. So if there was political failure to supervise the Ruwero Triangle docket, the Baganda ministers are the ones responsible. We can pull out the budget for the last 37 years and show the budget and its outcome, and we can square the place the blame. So I am saying that's what the government, the NRM, political machinery ought to do, and not give Chagulanyi. Now, you're saying, where is the balance? If I were Chagulanyi and members of NUP, I think they're the ones who should go back and say, by the way, Mr. Principal, have you understood the import, the effect, the impact of the statements you made? Do you see how we are getting the heat in the media? And that should force them to have self-introspection. And hopefully, they don't have to change the message, but they can change the packaging. So the onus is really up to Chagulanyi and NUP leadership. Do they want the rest of Ugandans to see them via these accusations that they are sectarian? They are a group of leaders who lobby and who throw around unsubstantiated allegations on things that are provable. For example, those cases of the death of Kasirye Gwanga. What competence does Chagulanyi have to declare somebody a murderer? And so on and so forth. So I am simply saying we could have handled this differently. It is the same thing which we have been doing here. Arrest. Probably you don't need to arrest, you need to summon somebody to come by themselves to the police or to court. You don't have to arrest, so that you deny them that publicity. And for me, I thought we can bring Chagulanyi here and we debate policy.
So is it a failure of the NRM, the ruling NRM, to send its cadres to counter that message?
No, partly it's failure to do that. I think the NRM is so satisfied that we are complacent. We are not doing the things we are supposed to do politically.
Well, they are satisfied that you have the majority. Therefore, the majority will do it for you.
No. The police should do its work as they are doing, but there must be political explanation. The police should do its work because I'm not privy to what other issues police has in order to say, maybe let us suspend so that we nip this in the bud. But I'm saying the NRM has a responsibility to answer Chagulanyi publicly. What we say, the lies, because it's mostly on lies. It's mostly on lies.
Has the NRM in a way been intimidated by the crowds Chagulanyi has been able to pull through Fort Portal, through Kasese, through Mbarara?
I don't think so, because what are these crowds? These crowds, I said on the show last week, I said, what is it that Chagulanyi is raising that Wesige didn't raise, that President Museveni himself doesn't raise? President Museveni has been a lead complainant of inefficient service delivery. President Sept has been a lead complainant in complaining about the government machinery of abuse of public resources. So actually, Chagulanyi, some of the things they are highlighting what NRM people themselves are complaining about. So we should not have issues with those issues.
You know, it's funny.
Government for 40 years.
You know, when we were in Makerere,
but I have said on this show, the other day you took issues with me and you have repeated it here today. You say NRM is suffering atrophy.
Yes, atrophy.
I'm saying in Asia, probably the success has engendered the inertia. Because there are people who will say, no. Oforo will explain, Todong will explain, but they not. In one of the discussions, I talked to the NRM people at the Secretary and I said, have you heard what Chagulanyi has said? The Deputy Secretary General of NRM comes from Nakaseke. Can we have her respond to what Chagulanyi has said in Luwero? I have not heard that response. And yet I raised it with them. I said, Chagulanyi spoke on Friday. I raised them on Saturday, actually. And I said, have you heard what he said? I would suggest that the Deputy Secretary General of NRM, who comes from Luwero, who has been Minister for Luwero, the current Director for Mobilization, my sister Seninde, is from this Luwero Triangle. Can we have a meeting, addressing a meeting in Luwero? Oh, boy, radio. I said this. So, for me, I'm saying, yes, Chagulanyi could have, is making reckless statements, but we can deal with it effectively in a different way without bringing the police. Because it has the unintended consequence.
But Mwamgusha,
Honorable, if you could just hold it a moment, we take a very quick short commercial break so that I can give enough time and Honorable Semuju. But I was just looking through.
Because you see,
Andrew Mujuni Mwenda and another versus Attorney General, Constitutional Petition number 12 of 2005, 2010, delivered on 25th August 2010. This is a constitutional petition that Andrew Mwenda took to court after he was charged with. You still, my apologies. You're still watching the Frontline on NBS TV, and we're discussing Andrew Mwenda's petition to court in 2005 after he was prosecuted. He was charged. I don't know if you're prosecuted.
I was prosecuted.
Yes, prosecuted for sedition and promoting sectarianism.
Yes.
Then he went to court.
I sought protection from the courts.
Yes. Okay. And then you sought the.
What was the case about?
It's statements that Andrew Mwenda made on his show, Tonight with Andrew Mwenda Live on FM radio, following the death of John Garang.
What did he say?
I was looking. I just put off the. I just put off the case. Yeah?
At that time, I said the government of Uganda had caused the death of Garanga by putting him on a junk helicopter late in the evening.
And who procured it?
To fly into a storm over mountainous areas, Imatong Hills, where Konyi rebels had Stinger missiles.
I should be ready.
And on each of those facts, by the way, I was correct.
I'll read sections of this ruling, parts of this ruling rather.
Judgment, not ruling.
Yeah, this judgment at some stage. But let me come to you, Honorable Segona.
Yes. I think we need to go back to the basics.
Your principal made statements that many people debating on social media and other platforms have judged as being tribal and sectarian.
Okay. First and foremost, and these are the basics, you cannot judge me by what you perceive. You can only judge me by my statement. And that's the essence of the Andrew Mwenda decision. Because the Andrew Mwenda decision, especially the lead judgment of Justice Molenga, was that Andrew Mwenda was even entitled to tell lies. And what you perceive, I cannot be judged by what you perceive, because perception is neither right nor wrong, first and foremost. I waited for a statement, because you're talking about sectarianism. Sectarianism goes hand in hand with ethnicity. I was waiting to hear that ethnic group that Honorable Kyagulanyi targeted. First and foremost, when he talks about people who went, overthrew a government, came in tattered clothes, even when they have been defended to have bought some 50 acres of land, you know. Now somebody is talking about 50 acres. The other day somebody said, oh, he went and borrowed money from UCB, from UCB back then as a cover-up to hide and go to the bush.
You are mixing up issues.
No. I know, and they are not mixed. I have consistently said that in 1980, Museveni did not have land. I want to challenge him to go and bring me a sale agreement where he bought that land in 1980. I'll give him a cow, because that is what the Banyankole treasure mosque. Njamuwente. That's number one. Number two, Kyagulanyi talks about a group of men and women who captured power and started grabbing land. Now, if you complain, you must be one of them. He did not talk. Is there a particular tribe that took over power, that went to the bush and fought, that came with, who are they? I want to hear. Maybe I need to be educated of our history.
Isn't there context, Honorable Segona?
Before
when you're
context.
speaking, when you make reference,
Yes.
you know the law.
There is a group of men.
Yes. Who captured power?
A particular tribe?
Who captured power?
Yes.
They came in tattered clothes.
Okay. Which
now,
tribe is that? Which ethnic group is that?
When he talks about etakali abajajjaffe,
yes. Is that ethnic?
Isn't he defining who bajajjaffe are?
No. First of all, don't the Banyarwanda have their judges?
Whose judges?
Don't the Banyankole have their judges? Don't the Japadola have their grandparents? Tell me that particular group or tribe of men that came from the bush. Okay, first, that went to the bush, came out of the bush with the tattered clothes and grabbed land. You see the problem with these thieves. You talk about a thief, he hides behind the curtain of his tribe. No, we are talking about land grabbers. I do not know, and I stand to be educated, if they belong to a particular tribe. Now, I'm yet to hear from, who is my brother Kasigas, to tell me. That's number one. Number two, from the statement of Enanga, he's talking about defamatory statements, etc., abusing leaders. Actually, say abusing leaders. Now, I want to hear which leader was abused and where the duty of the police stems from to defend the integrity of that leader. Because Ofono Pondo talked about defamation.
Enanga's statement quotes, mentions the President of the Republic of Uganda.
Yeah, but the President of the Republic of Uganda, and even in that judgment,
but you see,
he's supposed to be abused.
That is where the problem starts from.
It's not a crime to abuse.
If someone defames Yoweri Museveni, and Museveni believes legitimately and genuinely that he has a reputation, he has a name to protect, let him go and protect his name. The problem with Museveni is destroying institutions in this country, where he thinks he's the state and the state is himself. Take an example of the case of Machate. You remember about the case of Machate. Machate took Museveni personally to court. And Museveni decided to hide under the cloak of the Attorney General of Uganda. When Mashati won in UK, Museveni instructs Attorney General to pay lawyers to go and defend him in the UK. And what happened, the lawyers in Uganda here were paid 1.4 million pounds to go and defend Museveni. Chido Makuya wrote to him and said, Mr. President, this is a suit against you. Go and defend yourself. Museveni says, no, I'm accused of things I did as president. Man says, yes, but you were sued as an individual. Go and tell court that you were doing those things as government. Then I will come in, they will invite, if they invite me to come in as Attorney General of Uganda, I will come. Museveni said, no, I must be defended. And you know what the next thing he did? He sacked Kidu Makuya. He appointed Peter Nyombi, may his soul rest in peace. Within 2 days, Peter Nyombi signs an agreement with lawyers to go and defend Museveni. Because Museveni feels he's the state is himself. I sympathize with Ofono Pondo, whose approach, according to them, maybe is theoretical. Because he thinks that the NRM did not defend themselves. No, they did. The only thing they did is they used the machinery they are used to, which they think is part of their machinery. And that is the police, that is the army. If you're talking about protecting the law, for example, Museveni's son, as he prefers calling himself, was in Kabale, was in Bukedea. Everywhere he has been able to gather some people. He has been moving on the streets. On our part, by the way, contrary to the perception you're creating here, the police has continued to block the road and say, take this direction. And we have obliged. We have obliged. We have never made an agreement with the police that we shall follow their directions. We agreed to follow the law, first and foremost, and we have followed the law to the letter. Number two.
And the law, under section 32.
You said 32.
32.
Yes.
Requires you to follow the regulation of the police.
No trouble.
Yes.
When we followed those regulations, because we agreed, don't take this route, we take it. And Ofonopono was spot on when he said, there are spontaneous gatherings. What happens when people come? The only thing we can ensure is peace on our part. We are going to open our office here.
A person was killed during one of your processions.
Who was killed?
In Hoima.
That was an
Mugisa.
Accident. Museveni's motor vehicles have been killing people on the roads.
But you are a lawyer.
The other time we paid.
You are a lawyer, Honorable Segona. Does it mean that if someone else commits a crime or an offense?
We did not commit a crime.
No. If someone commits an offense,
yes,
then you justify your own?
No, absolutely not. I am saying it was an accident.
No, you keep referring
the
to...
same way Museveni's convoys...
That's not an excuse, Honorable Segona.
No. The same way Museveni's convoys meet accidents on the road. This was typical, an accident. But I'm also not averse to you getting, like Ofonopono said, the person who was driving that car, if he was reckless, charge him in a court of law. By the way, even when Kyagulanyi commits an offense, charge him in a court of law. You cannot first assume powers you do not have, and you say, no, you will not continue.
There was vandalism of a car.
By
a
who?
car was stoned in Mbarara.
That is the thing called collective guilt. Get those people. That's why we inform you to be with us. Do you know the reaction of Kulaije, which now eventually affected the police? We shall not provide you with security. We were all there. Security is there. Didn't you see people who were armed? Did we attack them? No, because we knew that their mandate under the law was to come and protect us. How do you know whether those people were actually no? You've had conspiracies by this government.
NUP organized those gatherings.
We organized the gatherings.
And it committed, by organizing those gatherings,
not the crime.
committed itself to managing those gatherings.
No.
Yes.
We do not commit to take over the role of police. If you find a criminal, even amongst ourselves, do your work. For those ones that might have vandalized somebody's car, police, go against them. You cannot go against us. So, first and foremost, there was no sectarian comment from my president. He only spoke the truth about a gang of men, I don't know if there were women also, who decided to loot this country and buy land. We do not know if they belong to a particular tribe. That when we are learning from the reaction that maybe they belong to a particular tribe, and we are going to investigate that tribe and see if it exists.
So do you know the people who looted the country and bought this land?
You want them?
I'm asking you, do you know them?
Ask Kasigas, because he's saying we are inciting violence against a particular group. Kasigas knows them. He will bring them to you. Now the next campaign.
Do you have a responsibility to identify if you know those gangs that looted the country? Do you have a responsibility to report
But
on
if
that?
I have not talked about them, you do not constitute a crime out of that. I will tell you that group
said so.
at my leisure.
You said that people have looted the
Convenience.
land.
You said,
At my leisure.
you just said,
Convenience
you just said
and pleasure.
that your president
Yes.
talked about a gang of men
Yes.
who looted
Yes.
this country
And have
and
robbed
bought
it. Yes.
land.
Yes.
Who are those men?
He will tell you at his leisure, pleasure, and convenience. Now, before he even tells you, you start saying he's targeting a particular group. Then you tell us that group. So I think ultimately it comes back to the same
Establishing a
thing.
tribe called looters.
Yeah, if you create it in the constitution, then you will charge him with that offense. Now, let me say something about the truth, okay? And by the way, the next process we are undertaking, away from the mobilization, now that we have been provoked, we are going to publish the names that will constitute the sectarianism by this government. Now, if there is somebody committing sectarianism by action, you talk about him, and it started in colonial times for the benefit of my young grandson of Onopondo. The colonial government brought it because they were proscribing freedom of expression. Abusing people. Yes, I've heard that. Is that criminal or it is bad manners, as Ofonopondo said? If you feel that somebody was abused, is that your responsibility as police? Are you enforcing law or ethics? Now that they talked about, because like you were telling me to agree with you, that they are looking at the president's son, who I know has many sons. I don't know, they may include some people on this panel. For young people like you, he has been calling you grandsons. Maybe for people of my age, or older than you, we could be sons. Supposing they were referring to me as that drunkard, as that mugwagwa guagwa, why would it be the responsibility of the police to know who that mugwagwa guagwa is, or that drunkard? And besides, like Ofonopondo was talking about defamation. You know, defamation is about character. First, defamation the statement must be false. If you are not a drunkard, and they have talked about a drunkard, what business do you have?
Okay.
And if you're a drunkard, and that's your reputation, defend it.
Let me bring in Honorable Semu Junganda. Someone here is saying that Bobby had crowds in Hoima, but today's results say otherwise. What went wrong? Do crowds matter? But Honorable Semu Junganda, the question about coexistence, how do you deal with... let's go back to the question of sectarian statements. Stalking tribal sentiment that the police is accusing Robert Sentam Chagulanyi of getting involved in.
You know, I was 2005. We did a story at the Observer after the arrest of Dr. Kiza Besigye. The Honorable Salam Musumba said Besigye had been arrested by Bahima generals. Incidentally, we had a photograph of Sare Tumwine and Sare Tumwine and Tinyefuza. So we did that story and published that photograph. I was arrested with James Tumusime, and we spent the next 2 years reporting to court. But eventually, I don't know whether they withdrew, but the matter eventually died. But I also went to court. I went to the East African Court of Justice. And the reason I went there was that at that time, all the generals in the military were Yabahima. And Aronda defended, he said it was historical because at the time of going to Luwero, they could not mobilize everybody. They are the ones who went to Luwero to fight. that was the defense by the CDF then. In Uganda, as a person, I don't know of anyone who is as sectarian as Museveni. I don't know. There was time you need to read and interact with John Kazora when he convened the meeting of the parliamentary caucus under the leadership of Mzee Augustine Luzinana. That's when he said, do you think that Specioza Wandera Kazibu is the vice president? But when you appoint her, the women, the Catholic, the Wasoga are going to be happy. Do you think that J.J. Odongo is the army commander? He said, it is sort of like Panafanaria, the jeeps, the military jump there, then they think they're in the government.
When he takes a helicopter and it lands.
Yes. And Kazora asked him in the meeting, is that how you want me to refer to your vice president? He said, no, I called here to teach you politics. The other day I asked Parliament to tell me whether the Museveni family are the most intelligent people in Uganda. That you have your younger brother Salim Saleh as a senior presidential advisor. You have your son Muhoozi Kainerugaba, a senior presidential advisor. You have Rwago, who marries your daughter, is a senior presidential advisor. Just in one family, you have 3 senior presidential advisors, and all those 3 are the highest paid. Even I asked, you employ a person like as a presidential advisor, Gerard Sendawula, with all his qualification and experience, you pay him 2.5 and Rwago 15 million. So I don't think Museveni, on matters of sectarianism, Museveni should keep quiet completely, and his family, because they are guilty.
Mr. Museveni hasn't said anything. The police has been speaking. His family hasn't spoken. The police has spoken.
Mashega told me when they were enacting the anti-sectarian law, that law was about publication, was about speaking and writing. And he said, you see, we had just come here with a revolutionary mind. We didn't even imagine that sectarian can be by action, that someone can appoint only people. So we are more interested in those who are promoting sectarianism by writing and broadcasting it. So those who are going to practice it, there is no offense for practicing it. That's why nobody has ever charged anyone.
Okay, Honorable Semuja, I'm afraid. Let me take this message as we... No, we are continuing. Yes, we're continuing with this discussion on Afro Mobile. And I will cross to Afro Mobile as I take this message from William Mobiru, who is in Nabingo. And he says, I would like to inform Mr. Medad Segona that there is evidence which proves President Museveni bought his land in Wachitura. Secondly, there is even a man who had forcefully grabbed the same land when Muze was in the bush. And in 1988, he took this case to the RC court, then with evidence confirming the land belonged to him. The court ruled in favor of the president and got back his land. He, however, bought another piece of land and donated it to the land grabber. What a good-hearted head of state. I am watching the show in a remote area from the Afro Mobile app. So